Rome was at the height of its power. One man stood at the top, Julius Caesar, loved, feared, unstoppable. But fear grew in the halls of the Senate. Senators saw their Rome disappearing. They saw a man who had too much power, and they decided he had to die. This is the true story behind the assassination of Julius Caesar, a murder that destroyed the Republic and created an empire.
March 15th, 44 BCE is one of those dates that, just stands out in history.
It really does.
And not for a battle or some grand discovery, but for a single, very intimate act of political violence. We are, of course, talking about the assassination of Gaius Julius Caesar.
And it's arguably the single greatest flashpoint in Western history. I mean, that moment where personal ambition just collides with political reality.
Right.
You've got this group, over 60 high-ranking senators, and they've all come to the same conclusion. The only way to save the Republic is to kill the one man who's become too powerful for it.
And that right there is our mission for this deep dive. We've pulled together the sources, everything from Caesar's own writings to the biographers who came later, to really getting to the context, the personalities, what was actually going on that led to the Ides of March.
Exactly.
We want to give you, the listener, the full picture of why this event felt so inevitable and, in a way, why it ended up destroying the very thing the conspirators were trying to save.
And I think a great place to start is just the sheer scale of his fame. It's something we kind of take for granted now.
Yeah.
But his name, Julius Caesar, it became so tied to the idea of what it means to rule that it actually outlasted the entire Roman Empire.
That's the first incredible fact about his legacy, isn't it? We say Julius Caesar, but the ancient pronunciation, as historians tell us, was closer to Julius Caesar.
Right, Kaiser.
And that sound, that word, travels across all of Europe, becomes Kaiser for the German emperors, Tsar for the Russian emperors. For 2,000 years, his name literally just meant ruler.
That's just profound. He was murdered because they were afraid he wanted to be a king, and 2 millennia later, his name is the very word for emperor.
So let's lay out our roadmap for this. We've got 5 sort of core themes we want to pull out from the sources.
Okay.
We'll start with Caesar's genius with words, his self-promotion. Then we'll dig into the Ides of March itself, the date. Why that day?
The symbolism there is huge.
Huge. Then we have to look at his use of what we'd call media and the intense backlash it caused with the elite. After that, the constitutional breakdown of the Republic under his dictatorship.
And finally, the really personal part.
The betrayal. The trusted friends who turned on him and why they felt they had no other choice. So let's start with Caesar the communicator, because long before he was a dictator, he was a master strategist, not just in war, but in, well, public relations.
Absolutely. He was crafting a persona, and you can see it in his writings and these famous phrases that we still quote today.
And maybe the most permanent piece of PR is just, it's baked right into our calendar.
Yeah, that's a good point. The month of July.
It's named for him, for his birth month. That's a daily reminder of the man, whether you're in Rome or, Ohio.
It really is.
But the phrases he coined, those really define his whole career, his audacity. The first, and maybe the biggest, is alea iacta est.
The die is cast. And this isn't just some catchy quote. This is the moment in 49 BCE where Caesar chooses civil war. He chooses it over backing down.
So set the scene for us. He's coming back from his victories in Gaul, and he reaches this little river, the Rubicon.
Right, and the Rubicon is everything. It's not just a river. It's a legal and political boundary. The Senate, which was being pushed by his rival, Pompey, had issued a decree.
An ultimatum.
Exactly, an ultimatum. They ordered Caesar to disband his army before he crossed the Rubicon and re-entered Italy. By law, crossing it with his legions was a direct act of rebellion.
So it wasn't just a line on a map.
Oh no, it was a declaration of war against the Respublica, the state itself.
So when he's standing there on the riverbank, it's not just a tactical choice. He's deciding the fate of the Republic.
Absolutely. The sources paint this as a moment of real, internal struggle. He knew what was at stake. If he fails, he's a traitor and he'll be executed.
But if he backs down?
His career is over. His dignitas, his personal honor, his reputation, everything he'd built would be gone forever. So by saying alea iacta est, he was declaring that the time for talking was over. The choice was made.
The risk was taken.
And the action was irreversible.
And that's why, even today, we say, crossing the Rubicon. It still means making a decision that you just can't take back. It shows you the power of that one moment.
And the second phrase shows a totally different side of his genius. It shows his speed, his confidence, and his supreme arrogance.
Veni, vidi, vici.
I came, I saw, I conquered.
Such a simple phrase.
Deceptively simple. This was his report to the Senate after a victory in Armenia against a king named Pharnaces. But it's not the translation that matters, it's the rhetorical punch.
Most of us just hear the alliteration, but you're saying there's more to it.
Oh, there's so much more. First, the brevity. 3 words for a major military campaign. It makes the enemy seem completely insignificant.
Like it was barely an inconvenience for him.
Exactly. Second, it's a perfect tricolon, the rule of 3. It's just incredibly memorable. But the most important part is the grammar. All 3 verbs are in the perfect tense. I have come, I have seen, I have conquered.
It's done, finished, complete.
Immediate, decisive, total victory. He wasn't just reporting it, he was, as you'd say today, flexing.
A mic drop.
It was a total mic drop. The sources say he didn't even put it in a formal letter. He had it written on a placard that was carried in his triumphal parade.
Wow.
He was communicating absolute dominance in the most efficient way possible.
So if you put these 2 phrases together, what kind of picture of Caesar do you get?
You get a man who is used to taking enormous risks and having them pay off every single time. A man who sees victory and self-promotion as the same thing. And a man who expects nothing less than total success.
And that supreme confidence, that belief that he just can't lose.
That's what makes his death so shocking. He was completely blind to the idea that failure wouldn't come from some grand army on a battlefield, but from the quiet, angry whispers of his closest friends.
Okay, so let's turn to the date itself, March 15th, 44 BCE. Because this wasn't a random mugging. This was a piece of political theater, choreographed down to the last detail.
The scale is just astonishing. The sources all agree this wasn't a small plot. We're talking about upwards of 60 senators. Yeah. This wasn't some fringe group. This was a huge cross-section of the Roman ruling class, all united by this one single goal.
And the setting.
Yeah.
They chose to do it in broad daylight during a Senate meeting.
Deliberately, they wanted to kill the tyrant Caesar for the good of the Republic. It couldn't be a quiet assassination in an alley. It had to be a public political act, a sacrifice, as they saw it, to restore liberty.
And the drama of it all is just amplified by the warnings he received. This is where history starts to feel like a play.
It really does. The later biographers, people like Plutarch and Suetonius, they really lean into the chilling warnings Caesar got beforehand.
Which brings us to the seer, Spurina. What exactly did he tell Caesar?
Spurina warned him well in advance to be wary of the Ides of March. But the really dramatic part happens on the morning of the murder itself. Caesar sees Spurina on his way into the Senate building.
And Caesar, with that classic hubris we were just talking about, he basically taunts him.
Yes. He walks up to him and says something like, "The Ides of March are here."
As in, see? I'm fine. Your prophecy was a dud.
Exactly. But Spurina's reply is what gives you chills. He says, "Yes, but they are not over yet."
That one detail changes everything. The warning was conditional.
It was. And Caesar's arrogance made him think he'd beaten fate just by waking up that morning. He didn't realize the danger was still there, ticking away until the end of the day.
And that exchange, which Suetonius and Plutarch preserved, that's what really cements the Ides of March in our imagination. It's perfect foreshadowing.
It is. Even the way they would have written the date down adds a bit of historical color.
On their wax tablets, right, the sort of ancient Roman notebook.
Yeah, they would have scratched Idibus Marteus, the Ides of March. And that phrase, that specific date, it just became instantly infamous because of what happened next.
And then Shakespeare gets a hold of it.
And Shakespeare turns it into this iconic warning, beware the Ides of March. And now, in so many languages, it's just a metaphor for impending doom. It's one of the few dates in history that's become his own cultural symbol.
Okay, so to really get why 60 powerful men felt like murder was their only option, we have to look at how Caesar was using his power. You could almost say he was an ancient influencer.
That's a great way to put it. He was using what was, for his time, mass media propaganda.
And his medium of choice was the coin.
The coin. And the way he used it was to a traditional Roman, basically sacrilegious.
So explain that. Why was putting your face on a coin such a radical move?
Well, for centuries, Roman coins only ever showed 2 things: gods or great Romans who were already dead.
So if your face was on a coin, you were part of history. You were in the past.
Right. The only living people who put their portraits on coins were the Hellenistic kings in the East, absolute monarchs.
So when Caesar minted coins with his own living portrait on them, he was basically declaring himself a king.
It was an unmistakable visual statement. The historian Kay Elling points this out very clearly. Caesar was using the coin to say to everyone across the entire empire, I am the monarch now, I am the greatest.
And because coins travel everywhere.
He was circulating his image to every corner of the Roman world. It was the only true mass medium they had.
So a soldier on the frontier in Gaul, a merchant in Egypt, a farmer in Italy, they all held Caesar's face in their hands. They knew who was in charge.
And this message was, you could say, segmented for different audiences. For the common people, the plebs, it just reinforced his image as their great benefactor.
And they loved him for it.
They absolutely loved him. He gave them food. He put on incredible gladiator games. He was their champion. Seeing his face on the coin was, for them, a promise of stability.
But for the ruling class, the senators, the aristocrats, they saw something else entirely.
Pure, undiluted megalomania. And to understand their rage, you have to understand their entire culture, which was based on this idea of dignitas.
Honor and reputation.
But more than that, their whole identity came from this constant, fierce competition, the wet camp, as some historians call it, to be the best among their equals. You earned your dignitas by winning elections, leading armies, and outshining your peers. That competition was the Republic.
And Caesar, with his face on every coin, was effectively saying, the competition is over. I won.
He wasn't just saying it was over, he was spitting on their entire belief system, the mos maiorum, the way of the ancestors. By seizing permanent unilateral power, he made their entire life's work meaningless.
Why bother running for consul if Caesar, the dictator for life, is just going to make all the important decisions anyway?
Exactly. He turned them from partners in government into his administrative staff.
Into his marionettes, as the sources say.
And that was unbearable. It wasn't just about the law for them. It was about their very reason for being. That coin was the final, undeniable proof that Caesar wasn't just trying to reform the Republic. He was replacing it with himself.
So this ideological fury was already simmering, but it was Caesar's final power grab that really lit the fuse. We should probably talk about just how successful he was.
His success was, it was historically off the charts. Conquering Gaul was something no Roman had ever managed. It brought immense wealth and territory to Rome.
And by 45 BCE, his power was just immense. The Roman world stretched from the Euphrates River all the way to the Atlantic Ocean.
From the Sahara Desert to the Rhine, it was a colossal territory, all under his effective command.
And yet, on paper, Rome was still the res publica. The public thing. How did that ideal square with the reality of his power?
It didn't. The whole idea of the res publica was that no single person could make all the decisions. Power was meant to be shared, limited by term limits and tradition.
And the center of that power was the Senate.
Yes, this body of up to 1,000 experienced men, almost all from the aristocratic class, who had guided Rome's destiny for centuries.
Now, to be fair to Caesar, his justification was that the old system was broken. It was inefficient, corrupt.
And he had a point. He was an incredibly competent administrator. He instituted real lasting reforms. He gave land to the poor. He fixed the calendar.
The calendar we still basically use today.
Exactly, the Julian calendar. So these reforms made him even more popular with the masses. They saw him getting things done.
But his competence had no respect for tradition. And the final straw came in mid-February of 44 BCE, less than a month before he was killed.
That's the moment. That's when his allies in the Senate get him appointed dictator for life, dictator perpetuo. That title was the point of no return.
Let's be clear about why that was so shocking. The word dictator didn't mean then what it means to us. It was an official Roman office.
It was. A dictator was an emergency measure. In a time of extreme crisis, like a sudden invasion, someone could be appointed with absolute authority to fix the problem.
But, and this is the key part, it was temporary.
Strictly temporary, 6 months maximum. That was the constitutional safeguard. It was designed to solve a crisis without creating a king.
So making that office permanent wasn't just an extension of his power. It was a demolition of the Republic's founding principle.
It was a total demolition. The Republic was created specifically to prevent any one man from having the unchecked power of the old kings. By accepting the dictatorship for life, Caesar was shattering that tradition. He was making himself a king in everything but name.
So at that point, it became crystal clear to his opponents that he was never going back.
Never. He had no intention of ever letting the Senate truly govern again. He was going to rule Rome alone. And for men who believed the Republic was sacred, that certainty made his death not just an option, but a patriotic duty.
And this brings us to the really tragic personal core of this story. The men who actually held the daggers. They weren't his enemies. They were from his inner circle.
Right. Cassius, Brutus, Decimus. These were men Caesar had promoted, pardoned, and trusted.
So what was the driving force for them personally? We talked about the general aristocratic anger being turned into marionettes.
That was the core of it, that loss of their political identity, their dignitas. It was simply intolerable.
So let's break down the key players. We'll start with the mastermind, Cassius.
Cassius seems to have been the most ideologically driven of the group. He was the engine of the conspiracy. The second Caesar was made dictator for life. Cassius started organizing. He simply could not stomach the idea of one-man rule. He provided the anger and the logistical push.
But Cassius knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed a figurehead, someone who could give the whole enterprise a sense of moral legitimacy.
He needed Brutus.
Brutus. And his connection to Caesar was complicated.
Very complicated. There was this persistent rumor that Brutus was actually Caesar's illegitimate son. Caesar had had a very long and public affair with Brutus's mother, Servilia.
So that adds another layer of personal drama. But his political value was even bigger.
Oh, much bigger. Brutus was, you could say, a living metaphor for the old republic.
Because of his ancestor.
Exactly. His ancestor, Lucius Junius Brutus, was the legendary figure who had overthrown Rome's last tyrannical king hundreds of years earlier and founded the Republic.
So if a Brutus was involved in this plot, they could frame it as history repeating itself. Another Brutus overthrowing another tyrant to save Rome.
It was the perfect branding. Many of the other senators made Brutus's involvement a condition for joining. His name was the key. It legitimized the entire conspiracy.
And for Brutus himself, this must have been an agonizing choice.
The sources suggest he really struggled with it. It was his personal loyalty and affection for Caesar versus his deep philosophical belief in the Republic. And in the end, he chose the Republic.
And then there's the third man who was often overlooked but was absolutely crucial on the day. Decimus.
Decimus is fascinating. He was a highly decorated general who had served under Caesar in Gaul. Caesar trusted him completely.
So much so that he had actually named Decimus in his will.
That's the truly shocking part. Decimus was set to inherit a significant part of Caesar's fortune, and he still joined the plot to kill him.
Which means his motivation was, what? Purely ideological.
It's hard to say for sure. It suggests either an unbelievable commitment to the Republic over personal gain, or maybe some other personal slight we don't know about. But whatever his reason, his role was essential. He was the facilitator.
What did he do?
Well, on the morning of March 15th, Caesar was having second thoughts about going to the Senate. His wife, Calpurnia, had had bad dreams. There were all these warnings. Decimus went to Caesar's house, and using their friendship, he persuaded him to go. He told him it would look weak if he didn't show up, that he would be offending the senators.
He literally walked him into the trap.
He did. And on top of that, Decimus had a large troop of gladiators stationed nearby. They were the security detail the conspirators needed for the immediate aftermath.
They knew there would be blowback.
They knew they needed muscle. And all of this was dictated by one single factor: time.
They were on a deadline.
A very hard deadline. Caesar was scheduled to leave Rome on March 18th, just 3 days later, for a massive new military campaign in the east.
So if he left...
If he left, the chance was gone. He'd be away for years, he'd come back even more powerful and victorious, and he would be completely unassailable. It was now or never.
And Caesar, fatally, made it easy for them.
He did. He had recently dismissed his Spanish bodyguard. He truly believed he was untouchable, protected by all the honors the Senate had given him. He never, ever suspected that the real danger wasn't from an enemy, but from the men he called his friends. #tag, #7, aftermath, source material, and unheard warnings.
So the betrayal was total. Caesar falls, stabbed 23 times, right at the base of a statue of his old rival Pompey.
A deeply ironic detail. And in that first moment, the 60 conspirators must have felt this immense sense of relief.
They thought they'd won.
They really did. Brutus and the others marched into the forum, holding up their bloody daggers, shouting, "Liberty is restored!" And at first, the Senate, just in a state of shock, actually granted them a pardon to try and keep the peace.
But they had made one catastrophic miscalculation. They hadn't factored in the Roman people.
Exactly. They saved a republic for an aristocracy that nobody else really cared about anymore. The common people didn't see this as an act of liberation. They saw it as the murder of their champion.
And the turning point was Caesar's funeral.
The funeral changes everything. This is where Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal friend, gives his masterclass in political theater.
He doesn't just attack the assassins outright.
No, he's much smarter than that. He starts by reading Caesar's will aloud to the massive crowd. And that will reveals that Caesar had left a huge amount of money to every single citizen of Rome.
And he'd left them his personal gardens as a public park.
Yes. So the man they'd been told was a tyrant had, in his final act, been incredibly generous to them. The mood in the crowd just flips.
And then Antony brings out the bloody toga.
He holds up the toga, points to all the dagger holes, and the crowd just explodes into a riot. The grief turns into rage. And the assassins are forced to flee the city for their lives.
So their attempt to save the Republic actually kicks off another brutal civil war.
The very thing they claimed they were trying to prevent. And that chaos only ends years later when Caesar's heir, his young great-nephew Octavian, finally defeats everyone else.
And ironically, becomes the first Roman emperor, Augustus.
The assassination didn't save the Republic. It guaranteed the creation of the empire.
Now, before we wrap up, we have to talk about how we even know all this. Because a deep dive means looking at the sources themselves.
Right. And our final fact is that this whole story is pieced together from different accounts, all written with their own biases. We have Caesar's own writing, of course, his book on the Gallic Wars.
Which is, let's be honest, a brilliant piece of self-serving propaganda. It's his version of events designed to make him look like a genius.
Absolutely. Then we had contemporary writers like Cicero. His letters are invaluable because they give you a real sense of the panic and the debates happening inside the Senate at the time. He knew Caesar, admired him at first, and then became a fierce critic.
But the really juicy, dramatic parts of the story, those come from writers who lived much later.
Much later. Plutarch, who was Greek, and Suetonius, who was Roman. And it's crucial to remember they were both writing about 100 years after Caesar died.
So they weren't eyewitnesses.
Not at all. Their accounts are based on older documents, stories, oral traditions. Plutarch wanted to write about morality and character, and Suetonius loved a bit of court gossip.
So all those famous anecdotes, the warnings, the dreams, they're great drama, but historians have to treat them with a bit of caution.
They add that layer of tragic irony, like his wife Calpurnia's dream, or the story of the Greek teacher Artemidoros.
The unread note.
Yes. The story goes that Artemidoros tried to hand Caesar a scroll as he was walking into the Senate, a scroll that had all the details of the plot, maybe even the names of the conspirators.
But Caesar was just constantly being swarmed by people with petitions.
Exactly. So he just assumed it was another request, passed the scroll to one of his assistants to read later, and walked inside to his death.
It's the perfect fatal mistake. He ignored every warning.
Because he fundamentally believed in his own luck, his fortuna. And he thought no one would be crazy enough to risk another civil war just to get rid of him. He thought the fear of chaos was his best protection.
And he was completely, fatally wrong. Hashtag tag Bates outro.
So we've really gone deep into the Ides of March, beyond just the headline. We've seen how powerful Caesar's name became. We've looked at that clash between his propaganda and the Senate's obsession with their own status.
And we've detailed how that final step, becoming dictator for life, was the one broken tradition that the old guard just couldn't tolerate.
And at its heart, the intimate nature of the betrayal. Cassius providing the anger, Brutus the legitimacy, and Decimus the final fatal push. An act they thought would restore freedom.
But which actually created the conditions for an emperor. It feels like they were trying to turn back the clock on a political system that had already changed forever.
They were. They failed to realize that for most people, the efficiency and generosity of one strong ruler was preferable to the constant infighting of the aristocracy.
The conspirators killed Caesar to save the Republic, and instead, they killed the Republic.
Which brings us to the final, lingering question. The one historians have been debating for 2,000 years, and the one we'll leave you to.
What do you think would have happened if he hadn't been murdered?
If he had listened to the warnings, if he'd stayed home that day, and then left for that Eastern campaign.
A campaign he almost certainly would have won. Would he have just come back and become the first Roman emperor anyway? Maybe more peacefully than what actually happened? Or was there still some small chance for the Republic to survive, even under his rule?
It's a timeless story. Power, ambition, and the human inability to see what's coming. even when someone tries to hand you a note telling you exactly what's about to happen.
Keep exploring the price of power. We'll see you on the next deep dive.